going to be doing a review and social analytical commentary on Season 1 of the FX series The Strain. I'm new to this genre. I haven't watched but very few horror movies, and this was my first experience, and I wanted to see why so many millions of people really like this genre. I know they have conventions and a whole community around this genre. It was a big surprise. I do watch quite a few war movies. The violence, though, was at a very gruesome level that I wasn't accustomed to, although after you see so many of the parasite carrying zombie vampires, the more you kind of get numb to the violence. I think that the mass media shapes culture wars, and there's a consciousness, an awareness by the producers that media and television series like these do have an impact on people. It gives them a subconscious architecture, I think, for people to look at the world. The main character, the master, is a type of queen bee vampire parasite hive mind ruler. The majority of the characters are not native-born Americans. I counted it up, and 3/4 of them are foreigners to the United States, or weren't born here, or first-generation immigrants. And that's just interesting. I think they are aware of it. I'd probably have to think about it a little more. What kind of message they're sending there. Another thought of mine is, why do audiences want to be frightened? Why is there so much fear-mongering? Why is it so pervasive in the mass media? I'm not going to try to answer those questions. I'm just going to move on to what I hope you find is a interesting analysis. I broke it down into bad guys and good guys. The master, which has a python type stinger, it's a great big stinger. Those of you who have seen the show will know what I'm talking about. And they're also tiny leech worms that can burrow into you, and even though they're small, in a matter of hours they multiply, change your organs, and a very large parasite grows inside them. And most of them are only like semi-conscious, where there's a higher up hierarchy of more sentient independent beings that maintain their intellect and most of their decision makings, other than when they're being ordered around by the master. But most of them, looks like 99%, just instinctually go after their loved ones, or any human that's near them that they can feed upon. So the master is at the top of the hierarchy. Interestingly, comes over from Germany in an aircraft and causes an infection throughout all the passengers and crew. The next down in the hierarchy from the master is a Nazi commandant who's a psychopath who enjoys having his power over others, and has his aging process has been stopped. So even though it's 70 years after the Second World War, he's still Looks like he's in his 40s. Um, there's a billionaire power broker with a African American stepson or servant. It's not quite clear who he trusts with his very survival. It it is implied that he probably paid for him to go to maybe a boarding school, uh, very high end, and throughout the man's life has given him a um, very wealthy, affluent, upper class type lifestyle and a prominent position in his corporation. Then there's a CDC scientist who's played by a favorite actor from The Lord of the Rings, who has a sick wife, and the billionaire and the Nazi commandant, who are under control of the master, use him to help smuggle out the master, which causes great guilt, and he eventually is infected and dies himself. There's a Mexican American character who's a thief, who's very bigoted, nationalistic Mexican. He has a brother who's a thief and a drug addict also, who spent his mother's rent money, and then there's his mother. They are infected with the parasite, and he now wants to switch sides and have vengeance. There's a Nigerian organized crime gang that the Mexican American character interacts with, and that's kind of left open for season 2. There's another character that's transitioning between the good guys and the bad guys, is a beautiful blonde lesbian hacker, and she takes money from the billionaire to disrupt the internet in New York City so that people can't communicate about the plague. She interacts with one of the main good guys. They become friends. He's a tall, first generation Ukrainian American. He's macho, he's buff, stoic, intelligent. He's an underachiever. His father's an architect, and he could have been an architect, but he chooses to stay single and to be a pest control officer. He seems to be tailor-made or engineered to be in this situation, and doesn't hesitate to do what he thinks to be done, which is to kill infected individuals. There's a couple of doctors, a white male, presume America. He's born in America. His family's probably been here a while. They're upper middle class or upper class, and he has a doctor colleague who's an immigrant from Argentina, and she mentions a couple times about disappearances during the military junta period in Argentina, and she's kind of having a little bit of PTSD type issues with remembering that period of her life. Opposing the master is a Jewish concentration camp survivor who carved the casket for the commandant. He's brave, obsessed, and a sincere believer in his Jewish God, which the commandant likes to mock him about. There's a interesting side story where the doctor you don't know if he was involved with his colleague, and that is what led to the breakup with him and his wife. But they're having a relatively amicable divorce, and they both are very devoted to their son. And his wife, her boyfriend, her son are living in a house that he comments that he's still paying the mortgage on. I found this to be a surprising and interesting side story. You can't help but root for him. I don't know if it's just because I'm a male, but his ex-wife and boyfriend become infected. So it was looking like he wasn't going to have a very strong relationship with his son, that his most of his parenting, male role model would be taken over by the boyfriend. So with this catastrophe, the doctor gets to bond better with his son. So I think the strain falls into many, you could also call it psyops. It seems like the United States cannot really be invaded by another country. We have naval supremacy, which means total control of the seas with our close allies. We have air supremacy as well, with a very powerful Air Force that really no other Air Force would be able to compete with. And in space we have satellites and a very advanced technology that no other country has. So we don't really have the fear that maybe if you were living in Poland you might have of Russia invading again and massacring people and locking away people or sending them to gulags and that type of thing. We realistically don't have that here in the U.S. yet. They seem to be pushing fear. And it is interesting that the plague comes from overseas. It's kind of sad they keep picking on Germany and throwing the Nazis in there, but they also are quite disparaging stereotypes of the Nigerians and the Mexicans as well. There's also a new storyline developing where there's some creatures that have the parasites that are independent sentient beings that are not in a hive mind, it seems, who oppose what the master is doing. They look down on those that have been infected, that are kind of mindless drones being ordered around. Overall, I was surprised that I liked this show so much. It was these side stories and the cultural interaction between the different ethnic groups. And I was very interested to see how they stereotype them. So the Nazis, the Nigerians, both get their negative stereotypes. The Mexican Americans do. The female hacker is kind of made to look a little bit bad, that she doesn't really even know why she's hacking and doing what she's doing. So I'd recommend The Strain. This was kind of a spoiler, but I thought I'd try mixing it up with something different. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.